that. An hour to an hour and a half, right, Jane?
I think so. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, yes.
Yeah.
Or 20 minutes or
Yeah.
No, it'll be more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So go ahead, Jane.
Okay, so I'm Jane LaFazio. I'm in San Diego, and I'm a member of San Diego Book Arts. And I'm a mixed media artist, and you can find me on my website at janelafazio.com. And today I'm going to talk about stamp carving and show you and demo stamp carving. Lori's going to put up a little poll because I'm interested in how many of you have done it before. I'm going to first show you some stamps that I've made. They're all original ones that I've made. Then I'm going to go over the design process and how to transfer the design to the stamp carving material.
Do you want me
I'm going to do.
Do you want me to launch the poll now?
Yeah, please. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll answer yes.
Okay.
That's good news.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to do a little bit more design process, and then I'm going to give you some ideas on how to use your stamps. So Lori's going to tell me the poll, and go ahead, hon.
High percentage, 88% have carved a stamp before, and
all right, guys.
no. So they know you've got extra tips for them.
So I appreciate you being here all the more. So I'm still going to go over some of the basics, like how to put the stamp, the carver together, just because I know this is going to be recorded. So I'm going to switch to my document camera. So I'll be doing this back and forth, and each time you'll see it takes just a moment for it to focus. So here are some stamps that I have carved. And then here's the big reveal. It's always so fun to see what they really look like, I think. Some.
Nice.
Here. And then these are my most, I would say these are my most recent, a series of succulents that I did that I really had fun with. I'm somebody, see these little carving marks? I really like those. That's called chatter. Not that you need to know that, but if you know an artist like Janine out of Santa Fe, her stamps are really clean, but I like that carved look. As she puts it on the floor. And then for those, when I teach this in person, I always give the students these little erasers, and they're called, they're Dick Blick, and they're called soap erasers, but they're a great practice thing because they're small, and you can see they make all kinds of fun little designs. And for example, just this simple one is a great, repeating design, horizontal, vertical. You can combine these graphic type ones. This looks like a canning jar, but it wasn't supposed, I don't remember what that was supposed to be. Little cactus for Tucson. A sun, this sun one is right here. So it's actually one stamp and then stamped both ways. So even though these are super tiny, they're really, I find, very useful. So let's start out with the design process. Now what I do, and I'm going to start with this small Dick Blick one, in part because I don't want to do some big elaborate stamp today because we'll be here too long. But this will give you the basics and how I do it. So I trace the shape multiple times on a piece of paper. And this is how I design when I'm not working from my own sketchbook. So I've drawn here a little cactus, flower, a little leaf, super simple designs. This little graphic is kind of fun because I think it would be really cool repeated. And when I talk about repeating, you stamp it this way and then you turn it and this. So it's kind of an endless patterning you can get. So let's say I've been into flowers lately. So I'm going to do this flower. So I'm not going to transfer it right away because I want to figure out what is going to be the stamp, the part that's inked, and what is going to be white. So I use a heavy duty marker to make that decision. So that would be the obvious choice. But you want to play with it. What if you want to do these extra lines to it? You want to work this all out before you transfer it to your stamp. So, maybe I want, this would be kind of ugly, but maybe I want alternating black and white petals. And in some cases, that is an important decision. So you want to work this step out. Let me show you here on this leaf too. I think, oh, here's the leaf. So one way could just be with the veins. And I'm using a head, oh, sorry, didn't mean to do that. I'm using a bold marker, and this is important because I don't want my lines to be impossible to carve. I want them thick enough so that I can carve them. And this bold marker gives me that. So for this leaf, for example, I could do half ink and half white. So I think that's a good example of how, even though you may have the design, you can change it in so many ways before you carve it. So this is probably a really good example, this little abstract one. So that could be black. So where these marks are, I'm going to carve everything away except these black marks. I could just go crazy with this little one in terms of trying different designs. Okay, you understand that part of it? Any questions on that part? And Heather, are you Jennifer's sister? No, you're not. You are Taos, New Mexico. Yes. Anyway, that's so I'm going to do, I'm going to use this little flower. It's not thrilling, but I want to just show you the process. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a nice image of it. When I say nice, the actual image I want. In pencil, I'm tracing it in pencil onto tracing paper. Now, I'm taking the stamp carving tool and I'm going to put it, the pencil side down on the stamp carving, on the stamp. And all I'm going to do is burnish it. And voila, there it is. So I'm not going to stop there. I'm not going to start carving until I do this marker again for two reasons. The same reason as I put it on the tracing paper is that I want to be able to see this bold enough line and carve around it. But also, if I were to start carving with just the pencil line, you always end up smudging the pencil line or fully erasing it, so you can't even see what you're supposed to be carving. And if you've made any decisions on the black, what's going to be inked and what isn't, you also want to transfer it in here. So,
Jane,
yeah.
There's a question.
Yes.
Will Serral transfer paper work as well to transfer? I'm not sure of this. SARALL.
I know what it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's literally transfer. Yeah, but I don't really think there's any need for it because you're going to have a pencil drawing of your stamp anyway. So just burnish it. So, but yes, it would work, absolutely. The nice thing about doing it this way, let me just, so if I was gonna do words, wait a minute, let's do San Diego Book Arts. You know, it's important that well, if I was going to do letters, let me just say this, then I could transfer it onto my stamp exactly like this. And when I printed those letters, they would be right reading. So you don't even need to worry about right reading and wrong reading when you transfer it this way. Okay. So here's the stamp carving tool. And there's your blades. And I always start out with the skinniest blade first. And this is actually the hardest part of the whole process is you take this soft rounded edge and you find this is like a globe, and it has just a little C shape where you can slide this in. And that's the trickiest part. And then you tighten it. And then if for good habits, you don't always have, you put them back into the handle so you don't lose them. So I'm going to take, this is just a piece of deli wrap that I'm putting under to catch. So carving. What I do is I outline the image first. And what's important here is notice you don't have to go deep. You don't need to go deep, and I have it at an angle. I don't have it like this. I don't have it, it's just at this angle, and it carves really easily. Carves like butter, as they say. I've also chosen in this, see, so I went over the black a little bit. So that would mean I went into my flower line. So I'm just gonna fix that. So I have just kind of redraw it. Oh yeah, so some of the decisions you have on your stamps are whether you want a frame or not. And I don't usually like a frame. I like stamps that are sort of freestanding like this, because then when you use it, you can change the direction. Put a frame on it, it usually only goes in one direction. You can see it is not difficult. I've got the outlines, and now I'm going to go inside. And another good habit, I see one thing, notice how I'm turning the block. Sometimes people forget that. You can turn the block as you carve. You really can. Another good habit is to carve away from yourself. And these carving marks are important. I'm carving within this little petal in the direction the texture would go. In other words, I'm not carving it horizontally, because those little carving marks, like I said earlier, that chatter adds a lot to your stamp, and you're going to see it. So you want to be conscious of the direction you are carving in. That's especially important when you carve the background. And I can show you some examples. I'm carving out, and because this stamp is so small, I'm just kind of continuing to use the most narrow blade. On larger stamps, after I've outlined with this tiniest blade, then I go to the next biggest. But on this, it's almost like you don't need to. All my little crumbs. And once I've gotten the basic outline and most of the carving done, I can test the stamp. You don't want to test the stamp until you've carved all the shapes. Why? Because once you put this on a stamp pad, it all goes black and you can't see your lines anymore. So how do I know that? Well, you can imagine. So it's pretty, it's pretty small and pretty delicate. So if you are doing your first stamp, your very first stamp, give yourself a break, maybe just do something that's more geometric, because you want to figure out how to use the tools before you do something complex. But I promise it won't be long before you can do something complex. I'm going to try. For now, I'm going to leave just that circle, and then when I stamp this, I'm going to see how that looks. You'll see that once I start doing the test stamps, then I can make changes. I'm going to switch to a little bit thicker blade, which I happen to have one right here. And I'm still thinking about the direction and how these chatter marks might show up. And keep in mind too, that you can always carve away something, but you can't add it back. Well, you can add it back, but that's with a Sharpie on the paper. You can't add it back to your stamp. I love, Lori, that you were in Hawaii and we get to hear those wonderful birds as our background. It's so neat.
Yeah, and if the power mowers show up, I'll mute myself.
Well, those can happen here too.
Yeah.
We don't have quite that many birds. Okay, so I think I'm at a spot where I can test it out. So I like the stays on stamp pads because they are permanent waterproof ink. And since I often add watercolor to my stamps, it's very important. They also work on fabric too. So there we go. So there's my first round of it. And this is when I look and make decisions. So I know I want to cut off. I never like a stamp that shows the edge of the block. So I want to cut those guys off. I think I want to make this a little thinner. Oh, I want to clean this up just a little bit here. There, okay, so you can see how easy it is once you've got the basics to make those corrections. And you can, go on like this, stamping and correcting for as long as you need to. And I said I wanted to, let me switch to the skinny guy. I said I wanted to make this a little bit more narrow. What else did I say? Let's try it out. Oh, and that's the thing too, you want to get all those little crumbs out before you test it. See, I already, oops, see that was a little crumb right there. Let me get a fresh piece of paper because I'm getting excited by this. Now, this is what I meant earlier too about being able to change, and these little stamps, or not really any stamp. doing repeats and changing the orientation. Oh, Lori, I think we've got a Hawaiian theme going here.
You're making a lei.
That's right. But how they change and when you start to group them like this, and I'm sure there's more ways I could group it. So I think that's pretty cute. Voila. And I probably could go in and clean it. All right, let me just clean it up a little bit more. Here and here. So there you go. That's how you carve a stamp. I have some other stuff to show you, but any questions at this point? Let me switch back to my, oop, that's not what I meant to do. Any questions, gang?
I'm going to say, go ahead and just unmute yourself if you have a question.
Yeah, and tell me too, if you're carving along with me. Who's carving along with me? All right, Sandra is. I see her waving.
Mhm.
All right. Most people are just studying. Okay. All right. Back to document camera. So
there is a question, is Stadler,
Yes.
Stadler still making the eraser?
This is a Dick Blick soap eraser. I know what you were talking about when you're talking about Stadler, but I just get these soap erasers, and the reason I choose them, and they're similar to Stadler, I'm sure, but is that they don't have any air holes in them, and that's really important. Some of the cheaper erasers have air holes.
Yes, they're still making the Stadlers.
Thank you, Pam.
So here's another, just to go over the design process. So here's a little drawing I did of some flowers. And then here and here, I played with that, a design, and then I carved the stamp. So this is that stamp. I really like to do my stamps from my own drawings. Show you this. One more here. Where is it? 1, 2, 3. The problem with these little circular stamps is they are so easy to lose. Okay, we have these two. So I want to show you. This
Hey,
took me,
Jenny,
yeah,
do you carve both sides of your blocks?
good question. On these, it depends how thick they are. On these, I find sometimes the text on the other side is distracting. It really just depends. Here's a larger one. It depends how thick they are. The Moo rubber stamps, that's the brand Moo. They're quite expensive, but they're like a ½ an inch thick. So you can carve both sides and you can carve the edges on those. So I wanted to show you this. When you have stamps and you want to overlay them, if I were to overlay it, it comes out like that, and that's not what I want. But if you do this, stamp it down, and then you've carved, you've stamped on another piece of paper and cut it out exactly. You use that as a mask. And then when you stamp this guy over it, you've masked that one out. Isn't that brilliant? Yes,
Oh.
I hear a chorus of yes. So that is a trick that took me a ridiculously long time to realize. So that the stamp that's on the handout of those houses, that's how I did that.
Nice.
So there is so many things you can do. So here is some vellum, a little accordion book, and I stamped those flower stamps, and then I colored them in with colored pencil. And I'm really into vellum right now. So that's one thing you can do. Here's a little example. I'm going to show you this part last. Let me show you this, and then I'm going to show you how, another kind of a design process. So this is a little book I made, and it's actually old artwork that I just cut up, or unused artwork. And these are all my stamps. And I'm going to show you how I stamped these onto tissue, because you know, when you stamp, it doesn't always come out like you like it. Stamp onto tissue, and then using acrylic matte medium, you glue it onto the page. My stamps, one of my stamps. Here's those little geometric ones. You know, I kind of played with the color and stuff. Stamp, pine cone stamp, another stamp, that succulent. So it's wonderful to be able to use your stamps and not worry how the image is going to work.
So Jane, there are a
Yes.
couple of questions about materials. And
Yes.
before I ask you the specific questions, I want to remind everyone that the flyer that you got, the link for the Zoom, that has a really excellent materials list on it with links for some of the items. So
Yes.
that should help. There's, okay, so Patsy is asking if for a good source for vellum. And the other question is, what do you use for the carving rubber when it's larger than the eraser? So I thought the vellum might be a really simple answer.
Yeah, the vellum, so you want a translucent vellum, and I don't have it here with me, the brand. I use two different brands. You want a translucent vellum because some is more see-through than another. So you want transparent, translucent. And I don't have that name off the top of my head. For the larger, which I'm going to show you in a minute, what is it, Speedball?
Yeah.
There's a lot of companies that make the larger.
Mhm.
And this is a portion of a 4x6. So I'm going to show you that in just a moment. But first, while I was on this track of using the tissue, so this is not vellum, this is tissue paper. So we've switched topics here. Tissue paper. And I stamped my little flowers on there. And you, as I mentioned before, you know, sometimes your stamps come out really nice and dark, and sometimes they're a little not so much. Well, this helps you choose a good image. I cut it out, and then I'm using acrylic. Now, is that backwards to you guys, or is it just backwards to me?
We see it forward. It's only
Okay,
backwards to you.
Thank you, dear. So it's Daniel Smith acrylic medium matte. Now, there are a lot of different brands. I just happen to have this one. And just like at home, I'm going to use my fingers. So here's the thing on how to do this with the tissue. I'm going to put a lot of matte medium down on this mixed media piece, a lot. Then I'm going to put the tissue down, more matte medium on my finger, and carefully make sure it's down. So they're very delicate, the tissue. So that's one reason I'm using my finger. And you want to make sure that it's completely saturated with the matte medium, and then it dries transparent. So like these guys are all this same process. So it's a wonderful thing. So if you make these beautiful book pages and you want to add stamps to them, this is a very safe way. My fingers are all sticky. Okay. Let's go over to, is it in here? Oh, no, this is another thing. One more show and tell, and then I'll get to that big stamp. So here is another one of my journals. And in this case, I drew, this is what I do almost all the time, is I draw something realistically, and then I break it down almost graphically with the idea of a stamp. So I think that shows the process well. And then over here, the berries and breaking it down to a stamp. And in this book too, I have my those houses. And in some cases, the houses that are in the flyer, I stamp directly on the book. But in some cases here, I stamped on a piece of craft paper and then cut it out. So you can always stamp on something else, cut it out, and collage it. And here, I stamped over drawings and a letter. Here's my rabbit stamp. He's popular. I use him a lot. Little moon. See any more stamps in here? No. But potential stamps, that's for sure.
Here's a question, and I'm sure you'll talk about this when you transfer your next design. My tracing paper moved around while I was burnishing onto my eraser. Any tricks, or is it
Oh.
just practice?
You know, I think it's just practice, but I think you can erase it off the stamp and transfer it again. But it is just practice of holding it down. So I'm going to go through another. So here's a larger stamp pad, and here is a daffodil, this way, that I've drawn, and now I've traced it. My sketchbooks. And I'll do that same process with the marker. Figuring out how I want this to be. And, you know, sometimes they're more complex from others. These flowers, I think, are really kind of straightforward in what's dark and what's light. But it's still a good exercise. Because I could, so it could go like that, or I could decide to have, you know, because this part of the flower has an edge. Could make that thicker. I could fill it in. I don't think that would look good. I do know that I could add like lines here. I think that might be the way I do it. Whoops, where'd it go? Here it is. So that's where the tracing paper really comes in handy for trying out different ways to carve it. So what I think I'll do is I'll do some little lines in here. I think that'll give the idea of that cup on the daffodil. So again, I'm going to trace it. Actually, it's good to go. I'm just going to use this. It's in pencil. That's important. And it's just a single pencil line. It's not even a dark pencil line. Here's my larger pad, my larger carving block. Turn this over and hold it down. And of course you could also, especially if it's a complex one, you could certainly tape the tissue paper down. That'd be a bad idea at all if you have a very complex drawing. So part of, I'll have to go like this to see, because of course it's reversed, isn't it? So it goes out. Wait, wait, stand still. Okay, here it goes. Oh, like here. And this little turny part. Don't forget this marker step. And even if you use, I'm very adamant on this, even if you say, oh no, well I have a ballpoint pen or something, this thicker line really makes a difference. I like the edge of that petal. Let's test out these little lines here. Now, with this larger stamp, the way I work, so notice first of all how I placed it. I didn't place it right in the center because that would have been a waste of all the rest of this. I put it on the edge. And then just with regular scissors, you can cut it out because there's no reason to use the whole stamp when you can use these other pieces for something else. And also, there's no reason, why spend all the time carving this when you can just carve this part? Super, super easy like that. And then I would just do, oops, where's my little, like this, and just proceed along in the same way. And this carves just like the rubber eraser, but you've got a little more room to groove. That's a nice thing. I've also found in teaching this over the years, sometimes you'll buy a block of this rubber for carving, and they're really crumbly. And I think sometimes they're just, maybe they're cheap, sometimes they're old. So my advice is, if you can, just throw it away or return it, because when they're real crumbly, it's hard to carve them. And I'm thinking about, oh, I got sidetracked there. I want to do the outlines first.
So Jane, I've found with the gray, sometimes that's crumbly, but I've not had it be crumbly when it's the pink or the blue. Have you had that experience?
Most of the time, I don't remember, Lori, because it's usually not mine crumbling, it's somebody in class. So I don't, I'm not remembering what they got, and I certainly don't know where they got it.
Yeah.
And, I think the point is to, don't buy the cheapest one possible. Like some of the less expensive ones, they're smooth on one side and there's a slight texture on the other, which means you can't use that other side. So, buy the Speedball brand or one of the well-known brands. So you get the drift. I'm just doing this outline and carving away. I really think that is all I have to tell you. Any questions?